Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to Turnaround Talks' third roundtable discussion of the year, which will focus on the early intervention of business rescue and the value of independent business reviews. My name is Jonathan Ferrie, and I am the founder and editor of Turnaround Talk. Joining me today are two of the industry's biggest names when it comes to business rescues. Unfortunately, due to technical issues, Celia Fanikak won't be able to join today's discussion. Before I kick off the discussion, please take notes of the house rules. All participants are to mute their microphones for the duration of the discussion. Only the panelists and myself are permitted to have their cameras on. If you are not a panelist, please switch your camera off. Panelists, please mute your microphone when not presenting, and please adhere to your allotted time when presenting. Attendees, please make use of the chat function to ask questions to our panelists. I will present them after their presentation. So over the past 2 years, we have seen a lot of companies enter into business rescue. And most of the time, the level of their financial distress has been severe. And the rescue practitioner really has their work cut out for them at that stage. If we also have a look at our state-owned enterprises and the media reports regarding the challenges that these companies face, they can really benefit from an independent business review. And that is the point of today's discussion, to highlight the value of early intervention of business rescue and how an independent business review can benefit a company. Please allow me to introduce my panel. Joining me today is Patlani Makombo, who is a senior business rescue practitioner and is the managing director of Genesis Corporate Solutions, which is a boutique firm that focuses on business rescue, corporate recovery, and turnaround. They also offer independent business reviews as a service. Patlani will be focusing on the importance of business rescue as well as the RBR process. Over to you, Patlani.
Thank you, and good afternoon, everyone. Do we have my presentation on the screen?
I can get it up for you. Just a second. Let me get it up for you.
Yes. While Jonathan is getting the presentation on the screen, I think maybe if I can kickstart, I think we have seen what has been happening across the globe with the COVID pandemic. That has also, affected each and every industry across our country, across the continent, and across the world. We have seen some of the biggest companies with strong balance sheet also opting for bankruptcy and restructuring one way or the other, be it formal or informal restructuring. Especially in the aviation sector, we have seen a number of airlines grounding their fleet last year. Some of the biggest airlines within the continent filing for bankruptcy. And so basically what we have seen as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic is that all the companies or businesses have been affected by this, even those that were very strong from a balance sheet perspective. Now my presentation focuses on why it is critically important to intervene or either bring in a professional expertise to look at your business as soon as the signs of distress start manifesting themselves. So if we can move to the next slide. So as we all know that the world has been plunged into a state of economic disaster and uncertainty as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic. The COVID-19 has caused a massive economic fallout in South Africa and most other countries around the world that resulted in the worst economic recession since the Great Depression. So the business world has been turned upside down. We have seen that, and the financial disruption it has created as a result of the COVID-19. Once healthy businesses are taking protective measures to remain viable, the impact of this health and financial crisis has affected nearly all industries in some manner. Being aware of areas or issues where your company is vulnerable is critically important. We have seen this in the last couple of months since we went, since the resurgence of the second wave, the third wave, and now there's talk of the fourth wave, and we're still going to see some of these issues coming up. If you can please move to the next slide. Now, the biggest question that one should ask, or we should be asking ourselves, is what is financial distress? So the Companies Act, in particular, Chapter 6 of the Companies Act, Section 128 defines financial distress to mean.
I don't do branded stuff.
As I was saying, so the Companies Act defines financial distress as or to mean that as soon as it appears, or
sorry,
the company,
sorry, Patlani, let me just interrupt you there for a second. Please, can all participants just mute the microphone during the presentations and for the duration of the roundtable, please? Thank you. Carry on, Patlani. Sorry about that.
Okay, thanks, Jonathan. So as I was saying, that the Companies Act defines financial distress to mean that as soon as it appears to be reasonable unlikely that the company will be unable to pay all its debts as they become due and payable within the immediate ensuing 6 months, that's commercial insolvency, or alternatively, or as soon as it appears to be reasonably likely that the company will become insolvent within the immediate ensuing 6 months. Again, when you look at it, 6 months, it's already too late. So we gotta be able to see these 12 months ahead or 18 months before the signs start manifesting itself, or before the company start getting into financial distress. So we will talk about what are some of the things that can be done as soon as we see, and what are some of the signs that we should look out for companies that are facing financial distress. If you can move to the next slide. So financial distress is a condition in which a company cannot generate sufficient revenue or income because it is unable to meet or cannot pay its financial obligation. This is generally due to high fixed cost, illiquid assets, or revenue sensitive to economic downturns. Again, the case in point, it's what has happened in the last 18 months because due to the COVID-19 pandemic. It also can be as a result of external factors such as government restrictions on business operations. In response to the COVID-19, we have seen what happened to the hospitality sector and the aviation sector and the tourism sector as a whole. A situation, or alternatively, a situation where a business has certain kind of financial difficulties, which may include inability to settle debts and obligations of the business, and may even lead to the more severe consequences of insolvency and liquidation. Now, what are some of the signs that one needs to look out for? So basically what we are saying is that there are various warning signs indicating that a company is experiencing financial distress, or it is heading towards such state. We have seen with our state-owned companies. We all know that most of our state-owned companies are facing financial distress. Case in point, it's we have been reading in the media about some of the state-owned companies that are unable to face or to pay their employees. Some of the state-owned companies that are unable to wash their face and to keep, or to pay their debts as and when they become due. So those are some of the signs that one should look out for. Being aware of these signs can help prevent failure, because the sooner you act, as soon as these signs start manifesting, you need to be able to bring in a professional expert or a turnaround expert to come and assist you to deal with some of these issues. When you are running a business, the ultimate sign of financial distress is usually running out of cash. You just don't have money anymore left. So basically, that's when you have taken time to address with some of these things. So as soon as those signs start appearing, you need to act quickly. However, even though it seems obvious, running out of cash is almost always a symptom and not a cause of business failure. So some of these issues will start showing its ugly head, and if they are left unattended, then they will start building up and become issues that will become or issues that will affect your business from a cash flow perspective. The key, or like any other illness, is to catch the symptoms early so that you can begin to identify the causes and manage it accordingly. So as soon as those signs start manifesting itself, you need to act quickly. So business can avoid insolvency by taking actions before it is too late. So basically, those are some of the things that one needs to do. And we will, as we move in the next slide, explain or share with the participant this afternoon what are some of the things that can be done to avoid a more disastrous situation. So some of the signs for distress are, firstly, cash flow. The first sign that things are going wrong is constantly shortage of cash. We all know that, when you're stretching around for cash to either, pay your suppliers, to keep your business, to pay your wages, those are some of the signs of distress. The old adage that says cash is king exists for a reason. If a business is spending more than it earns, it will lead to problems, and unless it is deliberate and well-funded, like in the case of a research and development project, where they are being funded through those funds. Falling margins or poor profits for a long-term survival. What matters are profits, not only sales. As the old say goes, turnover is vanity, profit is sanity. So poor profits are usually the first indicators that a business is not doing well. Falling margins suggest that costs are increasing and or income is decreasing, which can cause pressure on your cash flow. The third one, it's a default on payment. Anyone can miss or forget a payment, but once it starts becoming, a routine, which occurs frequently, it suggests that the business cannot pay its own, cannot pay in its own way. This is considered as a sign of business failure, paving the way for insolvency and liquidation.
How are you? How is tennis?
Difficulty in raising capital. If a company is constantly borrowing and asking,
I'll give you that. You're so cute.
More capital, it can be either asking its shareholders to recapitalize the business. These are some of the underlying signs that the company is increasingly finding it difficult to self-sustain. We have seen with most of our state-owned companies. I mean, they are finding it very difficult to raise capital in the open market. As a result, they are relying mostly on the shareholder or the fiscus to fund their operation. I mean, if you look at most of our SOCs, that's where, that's the position that they find themselves, where it is very difficult for them to raise funding or capital in an open market, even with the government guarantee, because banks these days have come to a conclusion that the bank guarantee is not even worth the paper that it's written on. So therefore, they are very reluctant to advance any funding to the state-owned companies, even with those bank guarantees. At this critical point, a critical re-evaluation is needed to assess whether the business is viable in the long term. So once you find it very difficult to raise capital, those are some of the signs that something is definitely wrong with the business. Inability to comply or legal and contractual non-compliance. This means that you are unable to comply with the terms of your loan agreements. You are constantly in default and renegotiation or asking some of your lenders to extend or restructure your payment terms. Those are signs of financial distress. Legal or regulatory proceedings against the company should be assessed and monitored carefully, as it may result in any claim on the company affecting its cash flow. Now, once some of these signs start manifesting itself, we need to take a proactive approach. And what does that mean? In order to understand how to properly deal with the company in financial, it is important to understand the key indicators. While it may seem obvious to measure financial distress by lack of cash to operate the business, many warning signs are present before the financial storm actually hits. We have seen with some of the businesses that some of us have been involved in. You will start seeing that once the revenue started declining, or once your product start decreasing, or there's no appetite in taking up some of those. Those are some of the signs of distress. We all know, I mean, I always give an example about Kodak. We all know what Kodak used to do. We all used to take pictures many, many years ago. But when they started manufacturing cell phones with digital cameras, even digital cameras themselves, everyone moved away from those paper photographs and into the digital space. And I think no, Kodak should have seen that as a sign, or a sign of many things that will be going wrong in the years to come. Once the company finds itself in financial distress, it should develop a proper course of action to address the issues at hand. But dealing with financial distress can be very challenging. However, if one assesses its impact early and plan accordingly, then one can avoid or minimize the distress. And how do we normally do this? Some of the proactive approach that one could look at is early intervention. A business facing financial distress must act as quickly as possible before it's too late to avoid possible disastrous situations, like filing for bankruptcy or business rescue or in liquidation. Chances of success are higher when there is early intervention. Other informal restructuring options can be considered if there is an early intervention. I mean, we all know that if you are sick, once you consult a doctor before it gets worse, then chances are that you will avoid ending up in hospital, because the doctor will then do a diagnosis and will then prescribe medication to deal with or to address your symptoms. Now, the second one, it's independent business review. I know my colleagues will also touch on this. However, independent business review, it's one of some of the things that one could do. This is where you conduct a 360-degree review of the business, where you will be able to identify some of the issues that are causing the financial distress. And this can be divided into about 3 different phases or stages. The first stage is where you bring in a professional turnaround specialist to do your IBR, or independent business review. And what they will do, they will look at each and every aspect of the business, identify the issues that are causing the distress. And once that will be the first phase, the second phase will be to come up with a plan to deal with those issues, or to address some of the issues that would have been addressed through the IBR. And the last phase will be the implementation of some of the plans that would have been developed to deal with the issues that would have been addressed. So some of these things, assist in terms of, assisting in dealing with companies that are in financial distress. One needs to act as quickly as possible. And secondly, one needs to bring in an expert to do an IBR, which will look at each and every aspect of the business and highlight all the issues that may be causing the company to find itself in financial distress. So as I said, we need to take control sooner rather than later. As I indicated, early intervention. The business facing financial distress must react as quickly as possible before it's too late to avoid business rescue. And chances of success are higher when there is early intervention. Other informal restructuring options can be considered if there is early intervention. Doing nothing cannot be an option, because if you sit and do nothing, and then the issues will just pile up, and they will then, if a storm is coming, you must prepare yourself to safeguard against a peril before it's hit you. It is critical to have accurate and timely information to help develop a viable plan to pull out the company from its financial distress. And you can only do this through the IBR. As with any financial crisis, there is no 100% guarantee of the success due to some external factors beyond the control of the company. But a well thought out plan will present a greater likelihood of a positive outcome. Again, this once, the reliance will be placed on your IBR, the information, the integrity of the information, and once the information has been, that information has been made available, the professional turnaround specialist will then stress test the numbers, review and assist with some of the plans that needs to be put together, identifying warning signs of distress, diagnose and understand the root causes. They will also come up with a short to medium term cash flow review. Those are some of the things that will need to be done. I've recently seen companies who have been operating without even having a cash flow forecast. My partner and I recently went to meet a client, and we asked we asked to see their cash flow, and unfortunately they didn't have one. And part of the IBR could be to review your working capital and options review to say we're looking what are the options. Once we have identified once we have identified all the issues that are affecting the business, one of the things that the professional specialist or turnaround specialist would do is to review the options available to address some of the issues. A contingency planning, this is where you need to come up with a contingency and scenario planning to say, well, look, if we implement this option, these are some of the contingency planning that we need to come up, explore the different options to address the issues. So for example, you might find that business rescue is not always the answer. There are other informal restructuring options that are available. You might find that you just need, to engage with your creditors and lenders and put together a restructuring proposal which will be accepted by all the creditors. I was also involved in Section 155 where we put together a plan to restructure the business before it goes into business rescue, and we ended up having a restructuring plan which was agreed by all the creditors, and there was no need to place the company in business rescue. So this brings us to the end of my presentation. I'm not sure if there are any questions.
Patlani, we're going to deal with questions after all of the presentations. So I'm going to hand over to Robin Nicholson, who's going to go through his presentation. Robin Nicholson is a director at Corporate 911. He is also a senior business rescue practitioner. In addition to business rescues and RBRs, Corporate 911 offers a wide range of services that enables the companies to return to profitability. Let me just enable screen sharing for multiple people, Robin, and then you can share your presentation. Robin, you should be able to share your presentation now with us. You just need to unmute yourself. There we go.
Yeah, I should be unmuted. Give me a moment. Okay. And I'll just pop it on presenter mode, make life a bit easier for you. Okay, so this Jonathan's done the interview, done the introduction. We're a fairly small business that operates in partnership with a couple of other people to give us the kind of depth and range we need. So I really focused this presentation around what is the focus of an independent review? And actually, at the end of the day, it's to identify the key uncertainties the client wishes to reduce. So IBRs are used not only around the solvency and liquidity testing or the financial reviews that so many of us are used to seeing and performing, because invariably financial distress is the root cause, and we sort of want to go back through the accounting entries to find out what's caused it. But very often, that's not what the client really looks for. So they try to find and confront the real and concrete problems of the organization. They seek to identify the true professionals who will do the work. So very often in IBRs, this sort of marketing team approach where you're sending sellers doesn't really work. They want to engage the people who need it. And part of that also then points to, do you have a professional team that can deliver the services the client needs? So while it's quite important you know what you can do really well, you also need to be honest about what you can't do. So if someone walks into your room and says, listen, we're an underground mining company, we need mining advice, perhaps, no. Well, my business certainly wouldn't be the right people to ask about that. I've tried to avoid going underground my entire life. So mining wouldn't be a good example of the kind of work we would do. And from our point of view, you know, the sales effort is made by those accountable for direct delivery, because you are dealing with normally boards of directors of companies of various sizes, and they're the key decision makers. And they are trying to assess whether or not they can trust your judgment in working out what's wrong with their business for them. So what does an IBR offer? You introduce more certainty into a particular area of the organization about which the potential client feels uncertain. And those are the big uncertainties. Is it really a going concern and can pay its all debts while they fall during the next 6 months? So invariably, this is a funder's request. The IDC, the PIC, the NEF, any number of the banks, so or you know, various finance houses. And of course, the big real question is, if it isn't, how do we manage the uncertainty? Do we need to liquidate? If so, what are the outcomes if we liquidate? Does a business rescue offer a way out? In fact, you know, so often we want to jump into rescue without recognizing that it's just a tool in a larger network and choices that we make around a business reorganization or workout. Can we do an organized workout with our creditors without business rescue? It certainly, business rescue impacts licenses or reputation. People feel very uncomfortable about it. And if you follow the INSOL 11 principles, you know, business rescue provides about 4 of the 11 areas that you need to cover in a turnaround. So our rescue regime, while fairly innovative in its own way, doesn't cover the full spectrum of what you need to do in a turnaround. And then really, what is the root cause of distress? Economy, technology, market collapse, fraud. It's critic diagnostic because it sets out the route to recovery. Particularly, you know, one must be careful when you're brought in to investigate fraud, because there are real consequences there, and you need to have the right kinds of forensic investigation in those areas. So we often, well, not often, but we've come across situations in business rescue where the root cause of the distress actually turns out to be fraud. And then you run into all the forensic stuff that you didn't plan on doing, but which is now required of you. And then the other big point is, are the directors exposed? So although they're asking you to give a view on the company, they're really asking the question about, are our sureties going to get called up? Are the secondary guarantees at risk? So the key answer to whether you're going to have a successful IBR lies in determining what services the buyer is actually seeking. You need to just establish this up front, otherwise you'll deliver an outcome your client doesn't really want. And that is really structured to answer questions from the client point of view. So are they security holders, shareholders, executives, staff, creditors, suppliers, or customers? The next uncertainty is whether benefits will outweigh the pain and cost of the intervention. Professional model requires a consultant to be able to persuade the client of the benefit case on an ongoing basis. His knowledge and skill are required to reduce uncertainty and to deliver an outcome for his ultimate client, whoever they are. So really, who needs the BR? So if you find the business of doing IBRs, who are the customers who buy our services? Boards of companies who are faced with an underperforming company or investments. You know, often boards don't really have time to look at a subsidiary that's either remotely located or is fairly small, and they will do an IBR just to refresh their board independently about what's going on in the business unit. Individual company directors are concerned about the solvency and liquidity of the company. So very often directors are uncertain about the way forward. And if you go plan A, then you don't have solvency and liquidity problems. So what's the likelihood of plan A working? Or plan B? and you're asked to assess which of these paths to recovery will work better for the company. Of course, credit insurers underwrite the whole credit book and supply chain in an industry of quite an active requirement for business reviews. Very often they have their own units that do this, particularly the banks will have their own group of people who essentially come in and do a business review. Financiers of the company's facilities are concerned about the management of the company, which may result in concerns about the solvency and liquidity. So if there's been a lot of staff turnover or a lot of bad press or whatever, the people providing trade finance for the company say, hang on a second. Of course, trade creditors are concerned about timely payment of their account. Staff and organized labor are concerned about the company continue to be an employer and pay wages. So yeah, you've certainly seen in the SOEs such as SAA and now Denel, where organized labor are actually calling for the IBRs to establish what's actually going on in these SOEs. So Jonathan also asked me to give you some examples of how this works in the real world. So I've had a go at this, and unfortunately, for confidentiality reasons, I can't disclose who the client was. And I've tried, at least to my limited ability, to make sure I don't breach all the confidentiality agreements that you sign at the outset of an IBR. But this one is a large industrial manufacturing enterprise. It is listed on the JSE. It's been underperforming for a number of years. The head office was on a cost and efficiency drive across a large industrial group on multiple sites. The request was to examine the cost base of the enterprise and make recommendations on cost and efficiency of the enterprise. Management had a thorough direct cost reduction plan in place, including replacement capital and customer efficiency. They'd really worked this whole cost reduction plan to death. What became apparent is they did not want an examination of two core areas. This is management, not the head office. Pricing and discount structures, labor efficiency, including product selection and pricing. So when we had a look at the core issues, over 5 years, the unit per hour production had not stagnated, but in fact declined. Over the same period, unit cost increased by 6% on average. The effective combination resulted in a decline in productivity of over 35%. So while they were still producing good output, in fact, they were producing far less than they had been produced previously. And that was written off as market demand and Chinese competition. But in fact, if they'd improved their productivity by the 35%, they would still have been price competitive in the marketplace. And the question then became, how did they achieve that kind of radical reorganization? This was masked, by the way, in the new products and production line was producing a line of products for which the plant had no real demand, despite a headcount increase of 20 and a capital investment of 35 million. So a brand new production line was now subsidizing the old lines, and the focus had moved from the core production unit to this new plant where it simply wasn't giving the kind of throughput and had in fact caused a major bottleneck in the plant. Simple plant changes could make a significant productivity improvement to the per unit cost of production. These had not been implemented because of expenditure cuts to fund the new line. So they knew what it needed done to make their core business more productive, but they diverted capital to make the new line more efficient. Two of the lines were uneconomic. A plant consolidation resulted in the closure of one plant, but overall productivity gains and reduction in overheads would enable the whole business to remain in operation. So effectively, they had to move one of their large pressing lines to Pietermaritzburg and shut the other two up here in Gauteng. And a new sales strategy was needed to develop focused on productivity and the productive and profitable segments of the business. So they really just simply weren't competitive in some of the traditional product lines, but some of the new product lines and new production processes had opened up new markets to them, and the sales and marketing people were so stuck in selling the old stuff, they weren't looking for new opportunities. So it really did add a lot of value to the client. It ended up being quite strained with the site management, but we were able to get them to recognize the difficulties and what they really needed to fix the business. The second was a media conglomerate, which was a portfolio of radio stations and media sales had not paid the original audience and sales forecasts. The major investors and funders had requested a review of the business organization strategy and positioning before recommitting to the next round of funding. There'd also been a fallout in the ownership and control structures, and the funders needed to ensure a strategy that made sense would deliver return in the investment. So this is one of those areas where you needed somebody with a lot of experience in the space. And myself and another partner, Mark Jenkins, who'd worked together at the SABC quite for a good number of years, were selected by the funders and the owners to have a look at the business. So the RBTR team composition became a major issue for the client. So they were looking for deep media skills in strategy and brand identity and positioning, strong business experience and understanding of the conflicting needs, deep understanding of the finance and operations in the media group, and an ability to develop a deep dive in a very short space of time. So we were literally given 10 days to do a major IBR on a fairly large media group. What did we come up with? The content profile, while focused, did not appeal to a wider audience, especially women and a broader socially engaged audience. The production and on-air teams did not represent the core audience and values. So what they were putting out there, the product they were putting out there didn't match the brand and the audience wasn't interested. The management structure was too compact in station management, but over-resourced in sales. So because the guys that ran the business came from a sales background, they had put a lot of effort into building all these sales teams without really having a product to sell. Performance management, the sales team was unfocused, not accountable for delivery on the strategy. While still a startup, the organization needed to build audiences before the commercial and scale. So the question then became, what did we actually do for them? We made a couple of recommendations: change on-air presentation teams to have voices that reflect the desired audience, drive a frequency awareness program on air by way of billboard and target reception areas, diversify the on-air content offerings to cover more diverse genres, both news and current affairs and lifestyle, focus their sales team effort and build relationships along the sales channels with major brands seeking innovative solutions with respect to the branding and marketing needs, and then refinance the group and restructure the way cash flows are allocated across subsidiaries. We were recently asked to go back in and relook at this client about 2 months ago, and I've got to say we were really surprised that they'd done so well during COVID. While their market had contracted from about 40 billion rand a year down to about 17 for the whole market, television and radio, they'd actually managed to at least stand still. They'd brought in some good salespeople, the on-air was on time, and they were driving a frequency and awareness campaign. As a result, the RAMs that came out last month showed that the audience had grown by over 600,000 people, listeners, over the over the last year. And on that audience presentation with their current Salesforce focus, it looks like they'll make their targets going forward. So for me, this was a particularly nice IVR because it was a very comfortable space that I know really well. Dealing with the management team who really needed really wanted the outcomes and took our recommendations on board. And we were able to go back and test whether this particular IVR really added value. And the funders themselves were very happy with the outcomes and agreed to a debt restructuring and a refinancing of the business, which is ongoing right now. So just in conclusion, the IBR really needs to be focused on the client needs. While a broader title of independent business review covers a wide range of focused services, depending on the client need. One size does not fit all, perhaps the most important rule. The consultant's skill and client needs to be closely aligned, bring in experts from your network within the industry-specific expertise. And this is really where the big boys like PwC, Deloitte, and that are able to bring a global group of experts into play. So you've got to be able to differentiate yourself against what the big guys can do. And really that's about specific industry expertise and time to respond and build a relationship. But I suppose all professional advice is acquired by the client's desire to reduce uncertainty and risk to businesses it's invested in. The cost and benefits need to be clear to both parties. Affordability and time are key to both parties. Time is always of the essence. Delay increases risks and further uncertainty in the project. So you're going to find that you're always under pressure in these IBRs. Jonathan, I think that's my story right now. I'm going to hand back to you.
Thank you, Robin. Thank you very much. It's time to put Robin and Patlani on the spot. We're asking them some key questions. I have got some questions. If any of the audience attendees have got any questions, please use the chat function and I will present it to both Patlani and Robin. Patlani, let's start with you. Looking at the distress and disruption that companies are currently facing, is there a greater need for IBRs now than ever before?
Yes, thanks, Jonathan. Yes, so I would say, yes, there is a greater need for that, because basically you need to understand where are the pressure points, because you can't just bring in a professional and he will just come in and do everything. So there's no one size fits all solution. You got to start with the IBR. The IBR will then identify the issues. Once the issues have been identified and highlighted through the IBR, you will then be able to focus your attention on the issues that requires to be fixed, because you might find that not everything is broken. Now, you don't want to spend your time and energy and money, for that matter, on issues that does not require attention at that point in time. As Robin have said, time is of the essence, and you cannot afford not to take actions because then time is against you. You're always under pressure to make sure that you are able to engage with your stakeholders, mostly the lenders, who would be breathing over your neck, trying to understand what's going on within the business. So basically, the first step is you gotta do your IBR, identify the issues and narrow the issues, and focus your energy and attention on those issues that requires your immediate attention.
Thank you very much.
If I can just come in on that question, what's different right now is that the nature of companies that are facing difficulties is very different. I see we've got Phil Reynolds around here somewhere, and Phil's been around for a long time, and so has Ralph. The nature of what we've seen in the inquiries we get right now are good companies' industries. So we recently spoke to an acoustics manufacturer that does partition. It's a lovely business. It's been around for 60 years. Its core focus was sound screens in conference rooms. And they had, while they were building out the conference industry, boom time. Now they've run through the whole, let's build COVID screens and the rest of it. And they're faced with just lack of demand. They provide an excellent service. People will build conference centers in the future. But right now they've got a problem. So they have to resize, but while they resize, they also have to retain core competence to upsize when the turnaround comes. So that's a very different kind of discussion and review, because you aren't dealing with management who are under distress from anything that's gone wrong in the business. It's really those external environmental factors that have compounded their problem in the business, but now they've got to respond, cutting back their business, right-sizing it, refocusing it, and they are competent at doing that. They simply are overstressed or burnt out, or they're in a space they've not been in before, and they need someone to come in and say, guys, you aren't drunk, you don't need to lay down, actually your plan makes sense. And then to take that plan to other funders and new funders and say, we've got asset exposure and asset capacity. We need to find the funding to do the turnaround plan. And so the kinds of challenges you see now in the sort of late stage COVID pandemic are quite different to what you were seeing 2 or 3 years ago, which was companies that were badly run. Now you're seeing companies well run that are in distress. The first round of COVID took out some of the fat, took out some of the meat. Now they're down to the bare arse, bones and solid muscle. There isn't anything left to cut. So it provides a very different point of view where they start looking for capital raising, from non-traditional sources. And those people have different requirements to, a bank credit committee.
I suppose then, Robin, that sort of really addresses the question that Spokazi Giorgio wanted to ask around whether you have a standard procedure that you use as an approach to clients as you present or attend to the client's needs. You really have to look at it on a case-by-case basis, bearing in mind the impact that COVID is now having on well-run companies and as well as badly run companies.
Yeah, look, I think a standard procedure in the sense of how do you approach a business review? What do you look at? What are the big areas? That hasn't changed. It's just now that the engagement you're having isn't with people who want to run away from the companies that they've been running badly. These are good managers who are engaging with you in trying to save their businesses. And the last thing they want is a business rescue. They're quite prepared to put in the hard work and do the work out. But, I think the key issue, Jonathan, is have you got the interrogation skills? Can you understand the financials? Can you understand the management reports? Can you build a relationship with the senior managers quickly enough that you can gain their trust so they will tell you what the real issues are? Like the little aluminium company, the real issue was one of the long-term managers who was a shareholder wanted to exit. After about an hour's conversation, he said, you know what, guys, I'm burnt out. I can't be here anymore. I support the plan and I need to go because by leaving, I will give them some relief on the income statement. But the real reason that we're doing this is because I want out. I've just had it. I can't do this anymore. So you've got to get down to those root causes of the problem. Otherwise, you end up window dressing and addressing the wrong issue. And I think Putlani is right. You don't have a lot of time to find that. So perhaps your interrogation skills, your ability to spot the misleading early is quite core in doing an independent business review. It was the same one that we did for the large metal company where you had a management team they knew that they were facing closure. And they knew that they hadn't focused on what they needed to focus on. And now they were trying to blame everything else and chasing mice and not buffalo, So you've got to be able to determine quite quickly that, where are the buffalo and shoot those if you need to replenish the business and renew it. So it's not a simple set of skills, but really listening and applying your mind are quite critical. It's not so much you're going in there to check the cash flow and the EBITDA calculation and does the spreadsheet add up. You've got to do that anyway, right? Because often spreadsheets don't add up. But, so you've got to do the hygiene stuff and then listen very, very carefully to what's being said to you.
Putlani,
if I can, okay, sorry.
I just got one more question. I think in the interest of time, let's move on and just ask one more question. If we don't get through all of the questions, I will present the questions from the chat and the questions that I've got to both of you, and we can maybe then do a nice article, a written article on this. Let's look at this, Putlani, a question from Mameka. She asked, please can you advise on how substantial implementation is measured or quantified in a successful business rescue? And that is really a very interesting question because that issue came up quite often in the SAA rescue. Like when they went into receivership and they came out of business rescue, they're not in the air, so people still ask, but was the business rescue successful? They're not flying. Was it successful? So just let's share your thoughts, please.
Okay. Thanks. You're putting me on the spot there, Jonathan.
That was Mameka. It's not me. It's Mameka.
Okay. I think it depends on what the strategy is. So firstly, the strategy in terms of that business rescue plan, is it a disposal process, for example, or is it a financial and operational turnaround that the plan that you'll be implementing? So say, for example, it's a disposal process where you're selling the business or the shares in the business. So once all the transaction agreements have been concluded and the payments and the purchase consideration paid and and the proceeds distributed in accordance with the business rescue plan, in my view, that will be substantial implementation. However, again, if it's a financial and operational turnaround plan, substantial implementation could be when you have when the business has been successfully been turned around. 1, 2, the creditors having been paid. 3, and all the key milestones that were very critical to the implementation of the plan have been achieved. So in my view, that will be a substantial implementation. So again, it differs from on a case by case. There's no one size fits all. And one could, I've seen some of the practitioners trying to be creative these days when they say, well, look, substantial implementation is when the plan is adopted. Again, that's the main purpose of putting up the plan. You want creditors to vote in favor of your plan. That's not substantial implementation. Substantial implementation should be what are some of the when you have achieved the key milestones and the company is no longer in financial distress, and all the proceeds in the case of a disposal process have been distributed, and the company is no longer in financial distress. That's how I will then define a substantial implementation.
Yeah, I think Pelani is right in terms of what is substantial implementation and also the abuses of it. Pelani, I'm sure you've seen it as well. These days, the banks and the big funders are very particular about what constitutes substantial implementation. So they want timelines and they want key performance indicators that will tell them, if you're doing a turnaround, have you made your creditors payments for the last 6 months? Have you met your sales targets? So they're getting quite particular around, like the one we did for the media company. They were the funders were very particular in requiring us to give them a set of defined outcomes on the turnaround strategy. What was the audience number they expected? What was the revenue number? And as they implemented the plan, they had to meet those milestones. So it's a lot more mature than it was 10 years ago, when it was sort of, oh my God, we've got a plan, people voted for it, so it's implemented. It's not as, it's a lot more sophisticated.
Yeah, I have got additional questions that I wanted to get to, but in the interest of time, I think we should wrap up the conversation today. And I will ask any of the questions that I have left over they're all for Robin Patlani, so you are off the hook at the moment. They are all for Robin, so I will ask him to answer them in a written thought leadership article that I will publish still this year. I would like to thank my panel members and attendees for joining me in today's discussion. A copy of this discussion will be uploaded onto the Turnaround Talk website very soon. This is the last roundtable discussion for the year. Until 2022, please stay tuned to the Turnaround Talk website to stay up to date with industry news and thought leadership. Thank you very much for joining today's discussion, Robin and Patlani, and our panel members.
Thank you,
thanks to all
Jonathan.
who took the time to attend.
Awesome.
Thanks.
Thank you very much, guys.
Everyone.